We make choices every single day that move us closer and closer to isolation, thanks to AI, thanks to social media, thanks to all these things. We all have blind spots. I do this all day long. Yes, you might have a pattern, but guess what? Your coach has a pattern too. We all have patterns, we all have blind spots, and it is actually an act of courage to go in and say, what are my blind spots? Like, do it scared, do it messy, just do it.
Welcome back to the 5 Minute Career Hack Podcast. I'm so excited that you've joined us again. If you haven't already hit that subscribe or follow button, be sure to do so that you don't miss the incredible guests, the experts that we're bringing on the podcast, just like the one we have for you today. None other than career coach, podcaster, Patricia Ortega. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Jamila. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I'm just so excited to be here with your audience.
Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I know they're about to get so much value. I'm a note taker. I know not everybody is, but I always like to encourage our audience to grab your notepad. You have the ability to rewind, but I want you to get some of this real time as Patricia's talking about it because this topic, I believe, is one that's going to help so many people today. So let's get right into it. My first question to you, Patricia, is what is a pattern?
Mm. So, I mean, on the most basic terms, a pattern is something that keeps happening over and over. When you think about human behavior in the context that we're talking about now, there are events. So, I had the situation with an uncle, a friend, a coworker, a boss. It's unfortunate, but I may not ever have to see it again. But when you see the same situation over and over, that builds a pattern. And so those patterns are the patterns that we want to pay attention to because we want to figure out, is this a good pattern? Is it productive? Do I want to leverage it and increase it exponentially? Or do I want to hold back and make some changes and avoid this pattern happening or at least lessen the frequency?
Very interesting. And there's some more I want to dig into what you just said there. But before I do that, I'd love for you to also, for the audience, just to kind of frame up the conversation we're having today around patterns. How do you know that you're in a pattern? Whether it's good or bad, how do you know you're in a cycle of a pattern?
Yeah. The question I hear most often with people coming to me are, I don't understand why this keeps happening to me. Or sometimes we start going after a goal, something like, I want to figure out what my career direction is. And that it doesn't start with, I don't understand why this keeps happening to me. But as we go towards a direction, I'll sense a bit of frustration. And it's like, no, I've
Mhm.
already been that route. I don't want to go down that route anymore. And so we go somewhere else. Well, I don't want to go down that route anymore. And there's something that we're avoiding or hesitating or something that feels like a little bit of friction. Sometimes that is a place where we want to just dive in a little bit more. And oftentimes what I'll do is I'll say, okay, when else have you felt this kind of friction? And we'll go through scenarios within your life, in your career, but also in your home, in your relationships, and we'll notice sometimes that patterns emerge. Often they're patterns that we can change through coaching. But if it's really deeply ingrained, it's more than a pattern. It's really like a life structure, like a foundation of how
Mhm.
you see yourself. Sometimes we then refer out into counseling, but more often than not, it's something we can tackle with, behavioral approaches and setting goals and being accountable and working through those one at a time.
So what I heard you say was the clients that you work with on a consistent basis and have done for some time now come to you and initially they believe one thing or the other and then as you continue to ask questions you find out that there's some friction or some places that they don't want to go or maybe we're in denial about or maybe not self-aware. Is that a good way to characterize it?
Oh, absolutely. And we all have blind spots. I do this all day long, right? And you know, right? We're
Yeah.
preaching to the choir here. But if you're listening, just know, yes, you might have a pattern, but guess what? Your coach has a pattern too. We all have patterns. We all have blind spots. And it is actually an act of courage to go in and say, what are my blind spots? Like, I'm willing to look at something that maybe I need to tweak or change, or maybe I need to leverage because it's a good thing. How do we out what those are and then leverage those for our future?
So number 1, you're not alone if you're listening. We all have
You're
them.
not
I
alone.
have several in my personal and professional life across
Mhm.
levels of relationships and engagements. So you're not alone. That's number 1. And I think 2, while, you might be wanting to focus on the things that are causing a bit of a pain point or friction like you talked about, there are also some that you want to focus on and exude as a strength. I don't want to glaze over that because I know a lot of times in this space we're really just focused on the stuff, right? So I
Yes.
really want to, I'd love for you to touch on maybe an example of working through one of these situations and it being a positive and being a strength that carried someone.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I've got this client I work with not too long ago, and she was running an entire program. She actually had started the program from scratch, and she had been running that program for several years. And that program was just kind of like, what's the word? Like foam. You know, when foam just comes, I mean, it was growing so much. She was having amazing speakers. She had the buy in of everyone around her. And she got permanent funding, which for her department in her industry, it is almost unheard of. They just operate off grants and grants and grants, right? And you never get that permanent funding. Well, when I was working with her to figure out her brand, she was like, "Well, I don't really have a lot, I don't really have a lot to share. I just kind of put the program together." And I'm like,
Mm,
let's talk about this, right? And it takes time. There's this fallacy that, oh, I'm going to go meet with a coach and I'm going to come out and I'm going to know my whole life's plan. And these things take time because they involve humans that work complex, right? And so we worked through, I think it was like 2 or 3 sessions where I was like, "Tell me everything you do." Like, literally,
mm,
just tell me everything. We would record the sessions, we'd kinda go through, and what we found is that a pattern for her is that anytime she meets someone, her brain automatically makes connections to where they could connect with someone else, how they could benefit her program, how she could support them, but she does it in a way that it doesn't add a lot of administrative, weight to anybody. It's really smooth. It's a true, like, it's a gift for her to
yeah.
think in webs. That's kind of what we got to, is that she operates in webs, and whatever department she goes to, it's not just this program. She's going to create a web where the program is supported by a network of influential leaders. And this is something that she naturally does. So whether or not it's in the job description, she's going to excel at it. And so we got to looking at those patterns, and it was important for her to go through and see those patterns happen over and over again, to write them down, right? To analyze them, to objectify them, so that then she can communicate those patterns confidently when she goes into a meeting or an interview, right? And when they ask her about, tell us about a time when, or how would you, right? She can then use what she's learned, create a framework. Instead of talking about one example, she can say, I've done this across my entire career. I
Mm.
have a framework that I work out of. And then she can communicate not only how she does it in her past, but also how she would apply that framework in the future.
Oh, that's so good. And I like the
Mhm.
idea. So, anyone about to approach an interview, that was a major nugget that Patricia just
Mhm.
described through someone else's journey of being able to showcase a framework versus just one specific example. So I love
Mhm.
that. And the other thing I heard that I thought was so important that you said there is that you were able to help he or she identify specific points and times where they did this throughout their career story. And I think that part is so important because it's just like driving. For me, everything is almost just like driving. When you first start, you've got to have both hands on the wheel. You've got to look to the left, look to the
Mhm.
right, look over your shoulder. You have to do all of this stuff consciously and subconsciously to do it right and not get in a car accident.
Mhm.
But then because you do it over and over and over again, everyone that's driven for a good while knows that sometimes you can end up home and forget that you made the turns and got there.
Yes.
But you've been
100%.
right? You've imprinted that stuff on your brain. So by you coaching someone and bringing that stuff to the forefront, having them write it down, so
Mhm.
important. Now I've got this blueprint of where I've made a left turn a
Mhm.
thousand times. I know how to make a
Yes.
left turn in my car without even thinking about it. And I think that's what you just described with your coaching. Is that accurate?
Oh, absolutely. And it's one of those pieces where oftentimes when people come to me, we want to start, we talked about this just a minute ago. We want to
Yeah.
start in the middle. We want to start at the end. We want the quickest way from point A to point B. But because we're human, because we have such complex and in-depth experiences, it takes time to find these pieces. But once you find these pieces, you can
Mm,
cash them all day long, every day in every position, right? You can cash this with your relationships in informally, formally, professionally, in business, right? You can
yeah.
continue to use these nuggets, and being able to recall specific situations in the past, it's helpful to share those examples, but it's also helpful to embody who
Mm,
you are, what you bring to the table, and it's helpful to carry yourself in a way that has the weight of that even when you're not talking about it. So a
Yeah.
lot of that, yeah, we're going to create your branding with that information, but a lot of that process, really, I'm asking you to share information with me so that you can hear it come out of your
Ugh,
mouth.
I knew you were going there as soon as you said
Ah,
it. It gave me the goosebumps because you need to hear it. You've written it down
mhm,
so it's now visual, it's tangible, and you need to hear yourself say it. And that builds
mhm,
confidence. I love that point. So, as we kind of move forward in this pattern, this cycle, so I know you get this question often with your clients. I've probably gotten it a few times at least, right? Why when you're in these patterns, right, that you've developed, right? So let's take
mhm,
ownership for them if you're listening. These are patterns that you've developed over time, consciously or unconsciously.
mm.
Why, right? You get that question, why am I making these decisions? Right? As if you're supposed to know, which you're going to help them with the answer by doing some guided discovery, but how do you support someone when they ask you that question, why am I making these decisions? What's good, Job Hunter? Yep, I'm talking to you. We wanted to take a quick break from this conversation, and I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. First, I've noticed that over 85% of the people who watch our podcast aren't subscribed. If you're one of them, go ahead and hit that subscribe button on YouTube. It really helps us out. Second, if you're an ambitious professional, which I know you are, who feels trapped in your career, I want to invite you to the Career Transformation Lab. This is where we help high performing professionals land their dream jobs and incomes without constant frustration, hitting apply, 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 and getting rejected, rejected, rejected. We'll show you how to build a career brand that attracts recruiters and hiring managers so you can stop applying and start interviewing. If you're ready to transform your career, click the link in the description to join. And if you want even more personalized help, join the VIP experience where we work with you directly. Let's land your dream job sooner than later.
You're so right to say as if I knew the answer, right? And I think it's only normal. I go to my coach, and I have actually multiple coaches right now,
Right.
because it's so helpful. But even I'm like, I want the answer. Like as humans, we want to know. We're curious people, right? And so it's a normal thing to say, I want you to have the answer. But part of being a coach, if sometimes people can think, oh, it's so easy to give advice, right? That is the opposite of what you do as a coach. Newsflash, right? Part of being a coach is this concept of self as instrument. And that means you yourself are an instrument to help people arrive at their own decisions, at their own reality, their own clarity, what I should say. And so, in that, to help people figure out all of those pieces, it's me trying to ask questions, but also follow their train of thought. That's
Mm.
probably the important piece is that you have a place where you're headed. You just can't see it. It's like you're in the eye of the storm because it's in your mind. It's so close to you, you can't see it. And as a coach, part of the work that we do when it comes to clarity is helping you follow the thread of your own mind, believe it or not, which sounds a little funky, but the reality is that when you're talking about any given situation, there is a direction that you're headed. It may not look clear, but there's a direction that you're headed. And so, what I do as a coach, and Jimmy, I'm sure what you do as well, is we listen and then figure out what direction are you going, and let's help you continue moving in whatever direction you choose.
And I would add that that brings awareness. It brings it from this thing, this abstract thing to reality in that
Yes.
conversation, right? But the mapping of that conversation, that I think that to your point, that's the bulk of what we do other than knowing the questions
Hmm.
to ask and listening very well. It's probably our two
Yeah.
biggest skills to get them to see and identify for themselves, be able to say it, and then continue the process. Right,
Yes.
right, 'cause
Absolutely.
I'm sure you hear people talk about feeling stuck or not knowing what to do, right? The
Yes.
action part of it is the hard part. Even though with the questions and the guided discovery, they're gonna have the answers. It just there's this overwhelming sensation that I don't know. I'm stuck. I don't
Yes.
know what to do. I don't know where that comes from. I need to research that.
Yeah.
I just
I'm
decided.
stuck and I don't know where it is. And here's one thing that I have found is oftentimes when we're stuck, we're not really stuck. It typically is, I always say, of our own cognition, right? It's when we are like, I can't move forward. And when we coach through it, what we realize it's I can't move forward because I believe,
Mm,
let me backtrack. I can't move forward because if I move forward, I believe I'm going to go in the wrong direction. So getting
mm,
clarity on that is like, oh, now we have a direction. It's to find the
a
right direction.
direction.
Or sometimes it's, I'm stuck because, and after coaching, we realize the reason you're stuck is because you're fearful of what's on the other side of that. So let's actually unpack that and figure out what do we think is on the other side because we don't actually know, right? So unpack what we think is the barrier, and usually that dissolves on its own.
Right. Right. And that's so good. Number one, if someone tells you they know what's on the other side, they're lying because no one knows what the future holds.
Nobody
So that's
does.
number one. That's a good litmus test. But then two, that it goes away.
Mhm.
I think that people feel that there's this, it won't, but because you've actually let it out, and then most, I know your clients are super smart, super highly
Yes.
intelligent. It does go away. You're able to
Yeah.
solve for it, but not maybe realizing how it was the narrative that you had created in your head, how it was prohibiting you from taking action is huge.
Yeah.
So love those points. And that kind of transition to another question that I wanted to ask you and maybe have you add a little color to that is how do I get out? So once I've kind of I understand what a pattern is,
Mhm.
good or bad. I've done some work
Mhm.
with you. You've asked me some questions. You're getting me to dig a little bit deeper to find out if I want to continue in this pattern or if I want to break this pattern. Right.
Mm.
And you just started to talk about how you get out of it. If I want to get out of it or
Yeah.
if I want to change courses, what does that look like in the coaching? Because I feel there's, God told me, I feel there's some things that people are hearing right now that's helping them understand the process.
Mhm.
Even if they don't know what their things are, they're understanding the process now. That's helping
Yeah.
some people overcome fear right now from making that call to talk to an expert like yourself.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So I always think of it in phases and it helps us to compartmentalize. Now, again, humans are complex and so we'll hop from phase to phase. But to kind of paint a picture, usually the first phase is just info gathering for you, info gathering for me. And, we talked about getting a lot of information from your experiences, from how you view, as you're sharing your experience, I'm also learning like how you view the world, how we're different. So I can, in some ways, kind of see the world through your eyes, which is one of the most important parts of that process. So once we get that clarity in between that, you're also learning from me where you're the expert on your experience, on your industry, on your role, on what you want in the future, and we help bring that out. What I am the expert at is to help you figure that piece out, but also to help you communicate in a way that's powerful. Also, to help you understand the systems that our mind uses to protect us or that our
Mm.
mind uses to prevent us from falling into a situation that we've had in the past, which may never happen in the future. So, as you learn about those systems, we kind of put this puzzle together. We come together where you bring your experience, I bring what I know about human behavior, and we kind of put those together. Once we feel like, okay, I can see the pattern. I've objectified the pattern. I can understand how it's impacting my future decisions. That's the big piece.
Mm.
Now we can move forward in knowledge. So now it's like, okay, we're A, walking with a guide, B, can now look past and see how our journey has gotten us to where we are. But now D, we can say, okay, we are going to have barrier A, B, and C moving forward. So what do I have to put in my backpack now to make sure that when I get there, I can overcome it more quickly. And so it partly it's contingency plans, partly it's if then, partly it's like behavioral coaching, cognitive behavioral techniques. There's a number of different things that we can do, but that promise you there is always something we can do.
So, as I always like to say, that's the good news. Because if you're sitting here and there was something that we've said here today that was like, man, I'm kind of feeling this, and it made you feel something, it brought up an emotion or a reaction that you're not comfortable with or that you want to explore. There's good news. We can get
Mhm.
you through it. We can work through it. And there was so much you said there that I'm going to tell them, you couldn't have written that all down. I tried. I tried. I tried to write it all down, and I'm an amazing note taker, but I couldn't get it all down. So feel free to rewind at this point. But the one thing that I did want to really underscore and then ask a follow-up question on was you mentioned this pattern, this cycle that you're in, this decision-making cycle that has you
Mm,
in a pattern, that its impact on your future and how you're
yeah.
addressing that, I think is super important because
Mm.
the one thing that we're certain of is that time continues to progress.
With us or
Therefore,
without us.
with or without us, therefore, your next decision, your next part of this pattern and repeating whatever it is
Mhm.
just around the corner. It's right in front of you. And so if I think about it, and I'm thinking through my lens right now, and if I think about that, I want to be ready with my backpack as you described for that
Mhm.
so that I don't get around if we're on a track, I'm not going around the track again doing the same thing over and over again. So that impact to the future, and I would love for you to just speak directly to the audience around the urgency they should have
Mm. Mm.
around impacting the future pattern.
Yeah. My goodness. I really appreciate you asking this question. So, I'm a firm believer that there are people on that path. So, if you imagine you're standing at a mountain and you're needing to trek a path, there are people along that path. And the choice you make today, every choice is a turn. And the choice you make today will turn you either toward that person that is there that you're supposed to be helping or away from that person, right? It might turn you away from all people. We make choices every single day that move us closer and closer to isolation thanks to
Oh,
AI, thanks to social media, thanks to all these things. And if you can just continue to turn toward people at the end of the day, it doesn't matter your job, it doesn't matter your career, it doesn't matter your level, nothing matters if you can just turn toward people in whatever context it is, it's typically a good turn. But people are complex. And people with their histories and their issues and their ways of being and their patterns and their behavior kind of sometimes clash with ours, but it is so worth it, right? We're talking about the good news. It is so worth it to go through those pieces because once you get over that speed bump, that relationship is stronger. And as a
mm,
result, not only is the relationship stronger, but they are stronger. You are helping put them back on track, onto the path that they're supposed to be on. And same thing for you. So to me, it's very much the decision you make today is going to affect where you are tomorrow. And there's a concept of I think it's a sniper. I heard it from um, a veteran, but he was sharing that if you have something you're aiming at and you're off by just 1 degree, the farther into the future that goes, the farther into the distance that goes, the farther off it is from its target.
mm.
And so one turn that you make today could set you exactly on the way you're supposed to be. Or let's say you make the wrong turn today and you continue to engage in behaviors that maybe aren't productive, or you miss out on an opportunity from behaviors that are really, really productive. What you're doing is you're now shooting in a couple degrees off, but over time, that will be farther and farther away from you really where you really want to be.
Oh, that's a bar. That's a bar. So you can't even
Mhm.
see, even though it's just so minute today. But into the
That's the
future,
problem.
that's good.
That's the problem is that we can't see the opportunities that we're going to miss tomorrow by not taking action today. And because we can't see them, this is how we kind of live our lives one way. And at the end of our life, we realize, oh my gosh, it's not what I wanted it to be.
Mm. And I'll
Yeah.
tell you, I know that's why that's part of the work we do here at the 5 Minute Career Hack. I would say over 90% of the people that we work with, it's that I've come to this place where I realize this is not it.
Hmm. Yeah.
So that millimeter, or I forgot the actual metric. I'll have to Google it. But yeah, whatever that is off is
Yeah.
huge. That's so good. And I think there was something else that you said there that I really want to underscore is that we're more and more with every day that passes, we're drawn to isolation.
Hmm.
We're drawn to isolation, and that is the trick of the enemy, no doubt. We're drawn to isolation, and that isolation is where these patterns can continue to perpetuate themselves that Patricia's talking about. And I believe that you're saying, as far as every turn, there's going to be some people, go towards the
Hmm.
people, even if it causes you to have to work through some tough stuff, communicate through some tough stuff, learn some new
Yeah.
skills through some tough stuff. Don't avoid those tough
Hmm.
conversations that are happening
Those
in
are the
community.
gold. Like
Yeah.
those tough conversations, when you're playing well, I don't know if I'm talking to the right audience because I used to play video games when I was younger,
Okay. Okay.
and you had to like beat the boss. Do you remember that? You had to beat the boss in
Yeah.
order to win,
To
but
get
you
to the next
couldn't get
level.
to. Exactly. So to me, those conflicts, you want to go towards those conflicts on purpose.
Whew, that's good. That's so good. So as we wrap up, and I'll throw this out here because I never tell the person that I'm interviewing, but we like to end every episode by having our guests share their final 5 words. Like if they can't remember anything else, these 5 words, and sometimes it's shorter, and every now and again I'll let the guest slide with longer because it's so impactful. But I want you to leave the audience with your final 5 words. But I know someone connected with you today. I am not confused about who I am and what I'm put on this earth to do, but I also know that
Mm,
there's a specific set of people that God's, predetermined that I'm supposed to speak to, as
mm,
as well as with you, Patricia. So I know there's some people that connected with you today and they need to be in your coaching program. So how can they get in touch with you? And I know we're going to leave some of that in the show notes and descriptions, but I'd like for you at
mm.
least to kind of share a little bit about that.
Yeah, there's 2 ways. The first way is my absolute favorite. Connect with me on LinkedIn, send me a message. I'd love to start a conversation, see what you're up to. And it's just so exciting to be able to reach over across the screen or across the microphone and actually meet a person, right?
Yeah.
So check out my LinkedIn. I've got a ton of content there as well. And then also the podcast. So I
Yeah.
have had you on the podcast. And so I'm really excited to share that as well. So yeah, those are the
Those are
2
2
big
best ways.
places where you'll find me.
Awesome, and we'll be sure to put that in the show notes description for you guys to click that link and connect with Patricia. And my only request is that you take action. If you got moved and something in you saying, "I need to do it immediately," don't hesitate, don't wait, just click the button in the description. All right, so now it's time for your final 5 words.
It's more than 5, Jamila. I'm a
All
rule breaker, so I'm just gonna
right.
tell you.
I love it.
Do it scared, do it messy, just do it.
Oh, do it scared, do it messy, just do it, as the great Nike team talks about.
Yes.
So that's how you'll remember this one. Do it scared, do it messy, but just do it. I love that, Patricia. Thank you so, so very much for being on the show today. You're the first guest to really talk about what we talked about today. So I know our audience
Mm,
was blessed by your message
mm.
and the process that you're bringing people through. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a pleasure. Thank you all for sticking around with us.
Absolutely. And as I'll always end every podcast, I'll see you soon, and I love you.